the Freud, where we're going to find out what the Freud is going on in your life. And today we're back on with Christiana Davidson, our life coach from London, England. And thank you so
Hmm.
much for joining me back here, joining our audience.
No
And
problem.
yeah, we started a theme a couple weeks
Mhm.
ago, and this is a lengthy title, but I'm going to read it to everyone so you know what the topic is. And please stay topic relevant. And we really, really appreciate call-ins. Topic of the day: effects of narcissistic mothers on their daughters and demeaning nonverbal communication. And this is part two on effects of narcissistic mothers on their daughters. And a lot of you know that narcissism, if you've been studying the mind map and listening to my YouTubes and podcasts, is a system gone wrong. And the mind map therapy is designed to turn that system gone wrong 180 degrees. And I'm going to break it down so everybody knows what the Freud I'm talking about, and then we can be on the same page. And then we could do a little bit of analyzing and shrinking, if you will. So the mind map is something that I created and became my psychological model, oh gee, close to 10 years ago now. And what is predicated on are childhood wounds, how we react to them, how we encode them. If you would be so kind as to put the mind map up, and then I can visually show those who are watching. So there are 9 panels: the past and how we encode the past into our psyche. The There it is, wounds of childhood, and there are 5 of them: physical abuse, sexual abuse, verbal abuse, neglect, and smothering, controlling. And obviously, when we're wounded, we have reactions to these wounds, which show up in the limbic system. They show up in the form of complex PTSD if they're not processed, and if they're early, and if they are profound. And then they also show up cognitively in our belief systems, and then we encode them into messages like I'm not good enough, I'm not lovable, I'm not competent, and so on. And then when the lever of panel 3 gets tripped up, so to speak, if person is activated in their core wound, their core belief around their wound, they fall into chaos, and then they try to defend. And usually these defense mechanisms are in the form of overeating or drugs, or um, shutting down, or you name it, smoking, watching too much TV, using the cell phone. And OCD could be a defense mechanism as well. And then there's, of course, the narcissistic defense, which is where we get very, very walled up because people who are narcissistically injured cannot take the pain. So what they do is they cut their feelings, and then they lack empathy, because empathy is an area where feelings are exposed and vulnerable, and because of whatever injuries they've incurred, they don't want to play the feeling game anymore. And then at the end of that journey, everybody's breaking down. And so the mind map is designed to look at all these childhood wounds and then take out and reprocess the psychological poison and paradigm shift people into health. And Christiana, you've been doing a lot of paradigm shifting. As a matter of fact, I've been watching you now for several months, and the way that you are working with our clients, I greatly appreciate, because you have empathy, and that is a quality that doesn't necessarily come with the territory of being a good therapist. Just because you're a good therapist doesn't mean that you have empathy. But without empathy, I don't think that you could really go deep enough with a patient. And we are animals and we feel each other. And if somebody simply doesn't care, if they're just doing an intellectual exercise with you, it's not good enough. So thank you
Absolutely.
very much for your compassionate work with the people at the psychological, patients at the Psychological Healing Center.
Such a pleasure, Dr. Judy.
Yeah. So with that said, why don't you
Mm.
recap a little bit about what we talked about narcissistic mothers, and their effects on their daughters. And then we're going to go a little bit deeper on the nonverbal, demeaning ways of the narcissistic mother and what that does to her daughter.
So, you know what you were saying just then, Dr. Judy, you know, that narcissists lack empathy. And that's the one quality, I think probably the most important quality in a mother is her ability to empathize and attune to the needs of her child.
Yes.
And so what we're looking at here today is just another facet, really, of the disconnect between the mother and the child, where the mother, again, puts her own emotional regulation above the need of the child to be emotionally regulated by her.
And that's because, I just want to add to that, is because she herself was injured. And I call it at the causal level, because the causal level is the blueprint, which is mom, grandma, grandpa, father, both sides, grandma, grandpa, great grandparents, and so on. This is multi-generational. And if the mother doesn't get the emotional, nutritional supplies that she needs, then she's really running on empty. And then she's got to suck dry her children so that she can be fortified. And that's the system gone wrong. So what do you see in your patients? What's the damage?
Well, I mean, for many patients, they've spent their whole lives trying to find some connection with their mother. And when I say that, I don't just mean with their mother. It might even be in other people. They're yearning for somebody to meet that hole in the soul.
Yes.
They're yearning for somebody to really see them, to really want to know them, who they are, and for somebody to really value them as a unique individual. So what I see coming into my rooms are people who have been so battered in their own self-esteem that they're still seeking this external validation. They're still seeking to meet the needs of others before their own. So there's a real codependency that I see in many of my clients at the start.
And not only are they seeking validation, they're also not built from the inside out, because those ingredients, so to speak, those psychological nutrients, as I like to call them, the attunement, the mirroring, the empathy, the calling out, the playing with them, the taking interest in who they are as unique people, as opposed to trying to make them out to be something that mom needs them to be. And so when a person is given these proper nutrients, they thrive. And when they're not, they have what you were referring to as the hole in the soul. And then they become codependent on others, because they need that psychological oxygen, so to speak, to thrive or even to exist.
Exactly, and that's exactly it. It is, you know, as you were saying, it's the system gone wrong. But actually, it's even more than that. It's almost the system flipped upside down.
That's right.
You know, it's almost the system really bizarrely switched round, where children are used in the role of the parent.
Right, and that's why we have that term parentified child. I talk to a lot of daughters in particular that have been parentified because the mother is needy of them and doesn't have motherly skills. So suddenly, or not so suddenly, and not subtly even, they're in the role of diapering their siblings, not just helping occasionally, I mean really taking on responsibility of a parent, or sometimes even caring for the parent on the level of being their confidant, and mom triangulating that child between herself and her husband. When things don't work out very well in the marriage, then the daughter becomes that best friend, And daughters are not supposed to be best friends. They're supposed to be your daughter. And you're supposed to give them guidance and have a sense of looking over them as opposed to, as you said, the 180 degree.
Yes.
Flop, they're looking
Exactly.
after
And
you.
yes, you know, the child is the one then who is attuning,
Right.
you know, giving eye contact. And this is where we're going to get into our topic today, the non-verbal communication.
Exactly.
It's all these cues.
Go ahead.
Sorry, yeah. No, it's all, this is where it's flipped. You know, the child becomes this source of emotional regulation for the mother when it should be the other way around. Those attachment cues are demanded from the child by the mother.
And then where's the child supposed to pull all of these emotional skills from, because they weren't even blueprinted and taught them. So today we're going to get into the subtleties, because it's obvious when a mother hits a child or name calls a child, or if the child is unprotected and therefore sexually abused, or if a child is controlled and manipulated. Those are the obvious ones. And the reason that I wanted to do a show particularly on demeaning gestures, demeaning nonverbal cues, is because we have to pick up on this with our patients, because they're being gaslighted. Mom might be saying something like, "I love you, honey," and then kind of like, you know, okay, facial expressions. They count big time. They can wipe out the intention. They can wipe out, or rather, they can tell the truth about the intention, which isn't really all that wonderful and nurturing.
And that's the crazy making part of it.
Right.
You know, because you're left thinking, what did she just say? But you know, my gut is telling me, or my body is telling me that there's something off here.
That's right.
And it leaves you doubting yourself then. You know?
Yeah, it's like me telling somebody, you know, you're really a good cook, and then making a face, or it wipes it out. And these are really subtle, and we're going to get into that subtlety. And this is a call-in show, everyone. So if you can identify with these demeaning nonverbal gestures, it could be a look, it could be a hand gesture, it could be turning the body around and not really engaging with the child. All of these count, and these are forms of human disconnect, aka narcissistic injuries. When you say something and your body says something else, it's crazy making. So please do call in. And I think the number is posted, so just use the number on the screen. And we are taking calls, and we'd love to hear from you, because it's always interesting when we can understand and help you understand the subtleties of what happened to you, even though you might be scratching your head and saying, wait a minute, I'm going down the list. Not much verbal abuse, not much this abuse, not much that abuse, but something didn't feel quite right in my gut. So you are welcome to call in, and we're going to go into these subtleties. So what have you heard in your office, or I'll call it the Zoom, Zoom office, the Skype office? What have you heard that the people are hurt by, but can't quite put their finger on?
That's exactly it. You can't quite put your finger on it, and you can't quite explain it.
Okay.
You know, when you try to start explaining it, it sounds as if it could be you just being too sensitive.
That they will tell you that.
Yes, absolutely.
Too sensitive. And that's a great tip off, because that's one of those phrases that narcissistic mothers, or narcissists in general, will say to people so that they can up the ante in their verbal or nonverbal abuse, because it's not their fault. They're just kidding around, or they're just being normal or teasing, and you are just too sensitive.
Absolutely.
Okay?
Do you know, this area of non-verbal communication, I think it's one of the areas, one of the one of the most powerful ways, in fact, probably the most powerful way that the narcissist communicates to their child or their victim, as they say. And when I was preparing for this, the song which kept coming into my head, and I remember Dr. Judy used to do Shrink That Tune.
We should do it again, and I'm going to bring that back because I know I get caught up lately with the topic, and we get so many wonderful calls, so I just use the time for the calls. But I think maybe I'll bring in a Shrink That Tune. And what was the song that you would have picked?
Well, it was only one line of it because the rest probably doesn't really relate. Okay, but it's you say it best when you say nothing at all.
Who's the song by? Do you remember?
I think it was Ronan Keating.
Okay, I'll look that up, and maybe we will Shrink That Tune. Okay, on another episode.
And this is it. You see, when you're in a narcissistic household, you're constantly being communicated with, even when the narcissist is not in the room, even when the narcissist is not verbally saying anything to you. They communicate so cleverly.
Okay.
So subtly, as you were saying earlier. There's always a sort of a hidden message in what they're doing. So, for example, I had a client the other day who said, she was really distressed. She was recalling, times when she was growing up. Her mother would, come home from work and go into the kitchen and start cooking dinner. And the mum would spend the entire dinner time, preparation of dinner, slamming around in the kitchen, huffing and puffing with the door wide open so that everybody could hear.
Sure.
And my client recalled those moments with so much sense of guilt and so much sense of shame. And you see, here we have a classic example of this underlying message that the narcissist is communicating without saying anything. And the reason this is so powerful is that it's deniable. So if somebody was to call the mother out on this.
Perfect. That's right. I want to underscore what you just said. The reason it's so subtle is it's deniable. So
she can always justify, oh no, you're too sensitive. I just had a headache, or I just had
Yes.
But you see, the message that came through to my client there was that I'm a burden.
Exactly.
And that was a theme that followed throughout her life, not only in that one example. It was communicated to her again and again and again through these non-verbal messages.
And you picked up on that because, see, if we're interviewing somebody that we're working with and asking them about verbal abuse that was inflicted on them, and they heard the words, "You are a burden," that would be kind of easy to detect.
Yes.
Okay, your mother said you were a burden, so you must feel that you're a burden. However, when mom's slamming around the pots and the pans and acting as if she's really, really burdened by the cooking and taking care of her family, the message is loud and clear. You don't have to say the words.
No.
You're a burden.
No, absolutely. And it's not surprising how, with a situation like that the person then later on develops an eating problem or has, is sort of trying to compensate for that moment later on in life somehow through an unhelpful way.
And these defense mechanisms are built around a protective mechanism, best attempt protective mechanism against the wound. So the wound being this message. I want to go back to the pre-verbal stage of development, okay, because that's where all this stuff begins. Yes. And imagine a mother, and we've all seen it, a mother who props the bottle up on the pillows and goes to watch TV while she's feeding the baby. Now, obviously, sometimes, and I'm not trying to say, Mom, if you've ever done that, then shame on you, because sometimes we are busy. We've got 3 children and we've got to feed the baby and we've got to put the bottles so the baby could fit. But just a little time holding the baby, just a little time making eye contact with the baby, just a sense that mommy's here, mommy loves you, and this is a nurturing experience. And of course, in an ideal situation, you hold the baby, and in a very ideal situation, breastfeed the baby.
And that's interesting in what you were saying there, Dr. Judy, you know, the pre-verbal stage, because actually what we're talking about here is mothers communicating pre-verbally.
Right.
And this is that flip again, you know,
right.
where she is communicating in that style.
Yes.
And you know, so that instead of the mother listening out for the pre-verbal cues of the baby,
mm-hmm.
it's the child then listening out for the pre-verbal cues of the parent.
And you know what happens to the child is that the child will then attune to the mother, and if the mother
yes.
doesn't want to be bothered, the child will, quote, dumb down their emotions to accommodate. Slowly but surely they'll stop even crying and they'll go deeper into this emotional turning inward, because if the mother is not calling them out with their eyes and with their smiles and their mirroring and so on, then there's that disconnect and the baby turns inward. One of the most horrible examples I've heard was a mother who gave birth to her child and then went on vacation right after and left the child to the nannies, because that was the style, you know, 9 months of gestation and then that labor and you know, the exhaustion, and poor mother had to get away on a luxurious cruise with her husband and recuperate and leave the hands and the baby in the hands of somebody else. And you know, maybe the baby's better off in the hands of somebody else, because if the mother can do that, then she doesn't have a lot of empathy to begin with. So, you know, it depends how you look at it, right?
Absolutely.
Can you imagine the message?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
You know,
yeah.
It's interesting when we look at, you know, just how mothers communicate. One of the key areas here is the eye contact.
Yes.
Of the mother. You know, it's like a narcissistic mother can communicate 1,000 words through a single glance.
Right.
And this glance, it's almost like a dagger that she can send out that goes straight to the heart of the child, wounds them deeply, triggers the core wounds. And then what happens is the child experiences that core of shame within them. There's something wrong with me here. I haven't been good enough. It's all my fault. And so the mother here is able then to project her emotions out onto the child. So, you know, she feels emotionally regulated, but the child then is left in this very vulnerable state of constantly then trying to make up for not being good enough, to try to avoid another moment of shame.
And these subtle interactions are the key to mental health. Obi talks about this. Eye contact, skin contact, attunement, the calling out. Neuroscience is showing that the most important phase is where all of the neurons and dendrites, right, they're developing. And why I call this process healing human disconnect is because it's also very physical. These neurons, these connective pieces of us are now developing, and if we put them on extinction, or worse, disconnect with daggers.
Yes,
right?
Exactly. In fact, some clients have said they've actually, and I've heard about this, where they've been able to see the change in the eyes of the mother. The eyes have almost gone black, and they know in those moments, it might just be out of the corner of the eye, something like that, but they can see almost the physiological change in the look of the mother. And it's you know, it's really terrifying. It's terrifying for a child to have a look like that from its mother. There's nothing more scary.
If you look at panel number 1, looks like to me, I use it metaphorically in many, many ways, but it could look like the occluded eye because a child finds herself in the eyes of mother. So if you're looking into mother's eyes to find who you are in her eyes, and it's dark and occluded and disconnected, and the child is just, looking into this black hole, so to speak, and there's no connection. It's a very
And we have a caller.
scary experience. And thank you so much for calling in. Hi, you are on the couch with Christiana Davidson and Dr. Judy. Hi, what is your name, please?
I'm Terry.
Nice to meet you, Terry. Hi, where are you calling from?
Oh, I'm calling from St. Joe, New Brunswick, Canada.
Oh,
And
awesome.
it's a little bit distracting because I pulled you up. I didn't know if I can get you on the phone or not, but I pulled you up on the computer and it's not in sync with the phone.
Okay.
So I'm watching the delay, I think.
Loud and clear to me. So yeah, welcome
Okay.
to WTF, and tell me what drew your attention to this particular topic.
Oh my golly. Well, Dr. Judy, I'll give you I'll share you a little bit of my story if you don't mind. I think it was about 2 or 3 weeks ago. I just recently started dating a girl for 3 or 4 months, and she was watching a lot of your shows and a lot about narcissistic people.
Yeah.
And I never really knew what the definition was. So I think it was just about 2 or 3 weeks ago, I pulled up one of your videos and it was like a revelation. My mom is a narcissistic mother. We never knew what it was. We never really could define it. And I started watching your show, and it's just like insert my mom anywhere in those videos.
Wow. Okay.
And I guess the disturbing part now is, because they say, well, now you know the truth. But the disturbing part is now I actually have somebody to blame. So I get the story is
somebody to what? I'm sorry.
Well, here's the problem with me, because I turned out to be an alcoholic. My brother turned out to be an alcoholic. All the effects of the narcissistic parent. But I'm, the rundown of my family is fits perfectly to what your description would be of a narcissistic parent. My father was a passive aggressive. Yeah, my father was passive aggressive. My oldest sister, is an anomaly to me. I don't know how she's been affected, but not as much. And my brother and myself both end up turning to be addicts, of course, right? And how that goes.
Right, and there's the hole in the soul, right? So that there was this disconnect,
right.
And so what do you expect? I mean, you're
right. So I guess my question to you would be, I've already defined what the problem is, and as an alcoholic, I've done a lot of research, a lot of recovery work the last 10 years.
Okay.
And as an alcoholic, we're taught to take a look at self. To me, that's the biggest healing part of this whole process, right?
Okay.
And conversely, it's what the narcissistic person can't do. But as we're taught as alcoholics, we're taught to take care of our inventory and take care of what was our part in the problem or the resentment, right? So now I got a totally different view of it. It's like, okay, I do have somebody to blame. It's justifiable. Like this person had a wicked effect on my upbringing, the way I viewed life, my decisions, and who I'd become.
Right. There's the blueprint.
Right.
There's a blueprint.
So I guess, right. So my question to you now is, there's a conflict to me I guess it's not really a conflict. The healing would be the same to me. It would be a psychic change. It would have to break down my belief system, right?
Are you talking about the conflict between the AA philosophy and the mind map philosophy?
Yes. Well, you know what? There's commonalities there. But like I said, in the AA program, we're taught to take a look at self and our part in it and exclude anybody, really for blame. And the healing comes from the empowerment of doing that within myself, the eternal part, right?
Okay. Let me see if I can help with this, because I've always wished that the mind map could be a part of AA, but I guess I'm too late, right? The book's already been written, and they don't want anybody from the outside in, and that's okay.
Right.
A lot of people from AA have sought mind map therapy, and I think maybe a great way to make this distinction is you are not responsible for part one of your life, okay?
Right.
You're not the cause of part one of your life, and that takes care of the mind map and holding your parents psychologically responsible and allowing full range of your emotions, to be angry at your mother and process the betrayal and process the apathy and so on. Okay, so that's that part of it. Okay, now part two is where AA comes in, where you could say, now that my eyes are open and I see that this is multi-generational, and I see that my mother was also not the cause of her stuff. However, we as humans can't just pass it up like that. We have to take inventory and say, okay, so now I want to go back and see, because I was not insightful or not fully insightful, right? Now I take inventory of all the people that I have damaged. So let me see, I projected on Harry and Sam and Susie and Mary. And let's see, I also tried to fill my hole in the soul by drinking, and then affected my husband's life. So that's where the inventory comes in. So I think they could work beautifully together, except that, you know, I'm a big proponent of going back to childhood wounds, and we can't just, in my humble or not humble opinion, just pass it off to alcohol is a disease. I think it's a dis-ease with some biological elements that then addict the person and cause this cycle of addiction to then keep digging the hole in the soul deeper, and then the person defends harder and drinks more, and then somebody has to pull that person out of the addiction and heal the psychological wound. And Christiana, do you have anything to add to that? Because I'm sure you work with people.
I do. So I guess, you know, I've listened to quite a few of your shows. I don't know what your take is on for the healing part of it. I guess what I'm more concerned with now, because I could just perpetuate myself. Like, I'm sure there's a lot of character traits that I've picked up, which is our narcissistic, and the biggest one being selfishness, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I guess the question is, if it all comes down to self, to me.
Mm-hmm.
So for me to heal, I have to take a look at self, right?
Right. And you have to take a
now
look
in order
at injury to self. Okay.
Okay. Right. So let's.
Yeah.
If you don't mind, I'll explain it this way then.
Mm-hmm.
If selfishness is the biggest part of being a narcissist, then I have to get out of self. And the only way I can do that is get out of self, is find something outside myself, which is a power greater than myself. Do you agree with that?
I do agree with that. And it's not contrary to looking at the childhood wounds that carved that hole in the soul that then had you consume on self, which is the selfish.
Right.
Because to me, we can't get from an empty vessel. So I get it.
Right.
So I get it that you want to share and care about the world and repair yourself through unselfish acts. It's also important to fill your vessel, because if you're just going to be sharing and loving and giving and so on and so forth without really dressing that hole in the soul and the pain of that, then I'm afraid then you might end up being a people pleaser, for example.
Right.
You might ignore the cause of the issue and just say the solution is be a caring, loving person and be the light to others, which I'm all for, except not at the cost of not looking over there, which is panel 1, 2, and 3, and then seeing the results of panel 1, 2, and 3 as the chaos, defenses, and the breakdowns. You see, so I think there's part 1 to this, and I know that AA doesn't concentrate on part 1 because, first of all, they're not therapists, right? This is an anonymous volunteer,
and I agree with that, and I guess that's part of it. That was part of my question, and how I pondered it too is, okay, AA's covered this, but is there something specific that I really, have to get in that's more specific and professional with dealing with the narcissist? Because to me, it comes down to disconnection, because I wasn't really ever connected with myself and love. To me, it's all got to do with just love.
Yeah, and it's hard to love yourself when you don't have an outside-in model. That's what Christiana and I are talking about, is that if that mother is giving these subtle cues and clues that you're not important, that you're not lovable, then you can go forward and be loving and kind and everything. But I just don't think it's enough. Honestly, I think you still have to go back to the hole in the soul and repair that so that you could be that bigger vessel, and then come from a more full healed point of view, and then do that part 2 that AA is suggesting, and take inventory. So you can, oh wow, I did that. Wow, now I see it. I projected. I defended. I demeaned, devalued, destroyed. Wow. Now you've got this.
Yes.
And it's also,
tell you the truth.
It's also
tell you the truth, Doctor.
Yeah, I know Christiana had something to add to it. Go ahead, Christiana.
My 2 pence worth, but just thinking about, when we grow up in narcissistic households, generally each of the children takes on a particular role, and that's part of the healing work too, is to understand, okay, what was my role, because that's how I was formed in, and that's how I came to understand that this is how I need to be in order to get my needs met. And then later on, once we do the work, then we can see, okay, as the golden child, I believed I had to jump at everybody's command. I had to respond to their needs. I had to maintain my position as the golden child of the family. There was competition. I had to compete with others. And then for the scapegoat, it's the opposite, that my needs are not important. Nobody cares about me. I'm not important within the family unit. And so we need to look at both of, your role, and then be able to say, okay, well, this is how that role is still playing out in my life today. And how do I then start to retrain myself?
And I just want to add to that. I want to add to that you can't take inventory on a hostage situation. You understand? You can't say, well, I have a default in my character because I pleased people if the system demanded that you please people. How can you take inventory on that? You understand what I'm saying?
Yeah. Well, that's the confusion. That's the distinction between what we're talking about. And tell you the truth, Dr. Judy, I haven't really taken a look at the decoding map, or what do you call it that you have?
Yeah, the mind map, the Be the Cause mind map, which I call Be the Cause, because at the number one part of your life, you're at the effect of, and that's why I call childhood a hostage situation.
Right.
And then when you open your eyes, now you can be responsible and do that work that you're talking about. And by the way, if you don't have a copy of it, those of you listening, grab a free PDF and share it on your Facebook, share it with your therapist. And it's absolutely free. We'll send it to you in a PDF form, and you can read about it, and you can connect the dots to what we're talking about.
Right. I got to share a funny story with you. I was a little bit concerned because I have a really close relationship with my sister, and she's just a beautiful person. She's a spiritual person, compassionate, understanding, but she still has a somewhat of a relationship with my mother. And I know a few times, when the topic comes up, that she's kind of sided with my mother a little bit and softened whatever she said. And it made me a little bit perturbed because I don't want to get a rift between her and I, right?
Right.
So I recently showed her the video and she came back and she said, oh my golly. So now we're both coming to grips with what do we do now? We connected all the dots, and the fit is perfect, what she is. She's on the high spectrum of a smart narcissist person. So she does subtle things, and all her behavior But anyway, I give her the analogy of, I don't know if you ever watched the Magoo cartoon, Mr. Magoo.
Yeah, I did. Yeah. Also,
So his eyesight, at the beginning of the cartoon, his eyesight is really poor, and he's driving along, and all this carnage is happening around him. And people are getting in accidents, and he's just got pretty healthy. And he gets home, and he's whistling, and he goes in the house, and he never even realized, oblivious to all the wreckage he's caused.
And that's analogous to the cracked lens of perception. You see, we're blind.
Yeah.
You don't see straight. So I want to address what you said, and Christiana, you do a lot of work with people who are the golden child and the scapegoat and the lost child, and I have video up on my YouTube called Sibling Rivalry. Parents are the cause. Why are they the cause?
Yeah.
We set up a horrible system, and then everybody's fighting. And how fortunate for you that you and your sister got together and said, oh my God, look at this. No wonder.
Yeah.
There's this mess. And then you get together and you do your work and you heal as much as possible. And then insofar as your mother is concerned, you understand that she was also wounded, which doesn't mean that you have to put up with her demeaning and devaluing and destroying qualities. And then that's where you get skilled and you develop boundaries and you figure it out, whether you want to go some contact, no contact, gray rock, which is, this kind of mild contact. You do what?
No, I've shut it off, Dr. Judy. Last time I was there, I tried to help her a little bit, and I left, and she had already gone around to her trumpeters telling her how ignorant and rude I was to her when I was just trying to be nice to her, help her. Okay. And it's just because I brought up something that, hit a nerve in her about pain and about being responsible to take a look at self and all that, right?
Okay, now I'm going to challenge you, okay? So,
yeah,
all right,
sure.
So please put on the AA hat, and this is in no way to demean AA, but I'm simply curious, how would you take inventory then if someone said to you, that's not kind to cut your mother off?
Yeah, well, they don't...
And take inventory on your lack of empathy towards your mother. I'm really curious because I didn't do the 12 steps. What would the philosophy advise in this case?
Well, here's the philosophy. The philosophy is it's a sick person, right?
Yeah.
Supposedly, and that's where this is my dilemma now. It's a sick person. We don't punish sick people.
Okay.
But in the same token, it's like I can't help not deny the damage, the harm, the misery, and it's still trickling down to my kids, her, the grandkids. Now I can't deny that, right?
Right.
So to me, I can't not see ugliness. I cannot see anything else but the misery that this person has caused. But yet it's a sick old lady, and we can't do anything. We can't get across to her. So she just carries a boat in her little Magoo little car and just keeps causing havoc wherever she goes.
Right, and I think that's a good way of looking at it, and that's why I don't use the blame word, you see. But every human being, at the bottom of it, we're all responsible for what we put out in the world and how we treat other human beings. Okay, so that's
right.
Psychologically, I know your mother will never own her own stuff, and there's another good video for you. Parents own your own stuff. That's a dramatic one because it's not such a pretty one.
Right.
However, she won't do it. So what do? You don't have to devalue her. What you do is do the work to process the anger, the justifiable anger that you, the child of you, has for being treated that way, for being discounted that way. And that's real. And then if you feel that her presence is injurious to your well-being, then I guess then AA and my philosophy are aligned in that you don't have to be around sick people. You can put boundaries up. And if you feel like buying her flowers for Mother's Day or wishing her Merry Christmas or Happy Hanukkah or Happy New Year, whatever you want to do, you can still do that because then you define the terms under which you want to interface with her. Make sense?
Right.
It's also, you know, letting go of responsibility for mum's life, because she is responsible for her life.
Right.
And as children of narcissistic parents, we kind of grow up to believe that no, we are responsible for their happiness, their well-being, and that sort of thing.
Well, I guess I heard it. I don't know where I heard it, but they're saying, like, I had a little bit of conflict with that, thinking I'm a bad person and I'm a bad son, that I can't get along with my mom. And there's a certain element saying that you should honor your parents.
Yes,
and I'm thinking, well, but then you define what a parent is, which is putting your emotional security ahead of their own. And then she never did. So why should I honor my parent?
Oh, you should watch a few. Sorry, I'm just directing you to a few more videos. Honor thy parents at what cost? Why don't you watch that one? Okay, that'll help clarify.
I sure will, and I will look for other material or resources that you had too, because I know myself now. I can continue to stew in this and give it energy, but instead, you can only play victim for so long. You know where that's going to go. It's going to be a merry-go-round. So
we have
I'll take a look at the material.
Yeah, we have a lot of tools for you. We've got the mind map video series. Put that up, and then you could see it. You could reach out to us, and we'll send you links and obviously the book. And then there's a recovering from narcissistic abuse plan that we have, and this is our specialty: how to heal from narcissistic abuse. And then we have wonderful people on the team like Christiana and other people who work at various fee scales. So don't let this stop you, because I will find you a person that you can afford and a plan that you can afford to do this. Because frankly, I want everybody to do this, because it's right. If it's not done, then the next generation isn't going to do very well. We're just not, we don't break this multi-generational pattern, we're just not going to do well. And it's our responsibility as mature adults to pass the baton in a clean, healthy way to the generation next. Right, I agree.
And that is honoring your mother and your father.
Therefore,
hey, that's a good way to put it. You're exactly right. Yeah.
Well, I appreciate. Yeah, reach out to us. And there's so much here for you to learn and heal, and you don't have to say, oh, I'm on the AA track, I can't do this, or I'm on the mind map track and I can, that's nonsense. And I urge everybody to use the healing tools out there that suit you when they suit you, and maybe your card is up insofar as look a little bit deeper now and stop blaming and shaming yourself if you don't feel that you're a good son, and know that it's impossible to give to people who didn't give to you. Impossible. That's why we have all these old people in old age homes that their kids dump them there. And that's, it's not only because of that, but a large number of those people may not have been the best parents, and their children just don't have anything to give to them. And they'd rather just leave them there and never talk to them again. And it's the saddest thing.
Right. Okay. Thanks so much for talking with me, Dr. Judy.
Welcome.
Is there, and how do I keep in contact, or how do I find out about the resources that is offered?
You could write me at Dr. Judy, that's DrJudy at psychologicalhealingcenter.com. You could go to my website, drjudywtf.com will take you to the Psychological Healing Center website, and just be in touch with me or any member of the team, and then we'll just put a plan together for you.
Okay, can you talk to my mother for me?
Of course I will.
I'm just joking.
Of course, and I'll invite her to the mind map process, and she'll probably.
Okay, I won't be there.
Right there. Okay, but thank you so much. Okay, my fellow.
Okay.
again for calling in.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Good night.
Bye-bye.
Yeah, so it doesn't only just because the title is Effects of Narcissistic Daughters on Their Mothers, you know. Same goes for their mothers on their daughters, sons
as
too.
well.
And yes, absolutely. So I think we have time for maybe one quick call. If anybody wants to call in, please do. And I'm happy to receive that call.
There's another aspect of this kind of non-direct communication or indirect communication from narcissistic mothers that comes up quite a bit in my client work, is the notion of gift giving. So, you know, narcissistic mothers are on birthdays and at Christmas often communicate through the gifts they give to their children.
What do you notice?
Well, for example, one of my clients was struggling with her weight. And she was beginning to lose some weight, and she'd been really taking care of herself. It comes to her birthday, and mum shows up with, you know, a massive chocolate cake, you know, chocolates and all the things that she knows that her daughter is trying to refrain from.
Wow.
So you know, what's the message here? Well,
wow.
I want you fat. I want you overweight, because then I feel better.
Yeah, and there's the demean. You see, there's no such thing as synergy in the system. And what I mean by synergy is I give to you, you give to me, we find the light between us, and as a result, we're both better off. It's not that. It's no existence of that system. It's only a system of I control you, I'm better than you. And if you're fat and I'm thin, I win. If you're poor and I'm richer, I win.
And there, you know, the trust then is broken. How can you can't trust your primary caregiver that they want what's best for you?
Yeah.
And I mean, that's an effect that lasts a lifetime. Then the trust between you and others, you're always wary of those who say they love you.
Because with trust, there is a mutuality. I trust you, you trust me, and we're building something fresh and new. We're building a we. It doesn't exist because the we never got built. So when I look at the mind map and I show the mind map to people struggling with narcissistic abuse, I let them know that they've only been living in panel 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, wounds, reactions, and codings, chaos, defenses, and breakdowns. And the shift and the recodings or the healing and the unity, they don't exist until we process the feelings and start bringing a new paradigm of seeing and being. The paradigm being that not everyone is like your mother, not everyone is like your father, and there are, believe it or not, some people on the planet that want to play the synergy game. 1 + 1 is greater than 3.
And that's, you know, sometimes clients can struggle with that because it's so unfamiliar, you know, that it shocks them to sort of, you know, well, what, I don't need to be constantly responding to this person's needs. I can say no and actually state my own opinion, and they'll still be there, that they'll still accept me, but it won't mean the end of the relationship. It's quite a process of coming round to, but very healing at the same time.
Very healing, but non-existent. I'll correct my math. 1 + 1 is greater than 2. Okay. So with the narcissistic system, 1 meaning the child plus mom is a deficit because the child will be less than. The child will be arrested in development. It will never grow into the big I, which is the self-actualized. It will always be under the shadow of, okay? So that's a paradigm that doesn't create growth, it doesn't create partnership, it doesn't create light, okay? It creates...
Where one is depleted.
Right, it creates a controlling system.
Absolutely. And that's, you know, I think that's the experience of many of my clients in relationship, is that I have to deplete myself. I have to be depleted in order to be loved in a relationship. And so then that filters out, you know, in situations at work, in relationship with spouses and
Yep.
whoever it might be,
Right.
I have to allow somebody else to deplete me. That's my role, to be depleted. But the healing work then allows for this change to take place, where you realize, no, actually I'm here to be full up and to share my overflow.
Yeah.
You know, and that's what relationship is about. In fact, I'm supposed to be filled up in relationship too.
Of course. And so the more we fill our vessel, the more light we have to give to the world. And as we share our light from a filled place, then we have even more to give, because that kind of sharing is not depleting. When I work with people, I don't feel depleted. I might feel depleted if I have to I don't know, return a bunch of phone calls that are administrative, or, I don't know, just a lot of paperwork and stuff. That might deplete me. But when I'm really doing the work and I'm in the room with that person, I feel energized. Yes.
Absolutely.
And that doesn't mean that I still shouldn't take care of myself and eat well and exercise and replenish myself and have people that are loving and my animals that are loving to support me. That doesn't mean that is also that isn't necessary. It is necessary. It's just that we have to understand that there are different paradigms within which we live, and the mind map teaches a whole new way of being and seeing. And then Christiana, it takes what I teach you and the other people on staff, and then you actualize the system. So it's not just a theory or a nice diagram on a piece of paper. It lives and it breathes, and people actually shift out of their old ways.
Absolutely. And I think that's exactly what we're talking about tonight. In fact, we're brought up in an environment where we're constantly being demeaned and shamed.
Absolutely.
Not verbally and non-verbally. Right. And then the work through the mind map allows us then to become the inner parent, the good inner parent for ourselves, where we can actually build ourselves up, become our own inner cheerleader, as opposed to the inner critic, which was nurtured from such a young age.
Which is the psychovirus that people ingest into the fiber of their being and then reverberate in their head. And I know we only have a couple of minutes. I just want to share once again that the book is available for free, the PDF. If you can show people a copy of that, thank you so much. And then there's always the mind map video series, the 9-panel mind map video series. That is just a great way to integrate all of the panels and get a great psychoeducation through that, and then combine that with some therapy or coaching. And then there's the mind map Journey to Healing from Narcissistic Abuse, hosted by my life coach, Epstein. And that's a specific process of healing from narcissistic abuse, which includes this video and a journal, and then going into the topic of apathy and gaslighting and nonverbal and verbal communications that demean, devalue, and destroy a human being. So, Christiana, I know that we will have you back. And for those of you who want to connect with Christiana directly, you're offering free consultations. And you can reach Christiana very simply at Christiana, Chrisstiana, correct?
Correct.
At psychologicalhealingcenter.com. So thank you very, very much for being on air with me once again. It makes it so nice for me to speak to you and share ideas. And audience, thank you so much for joining in, and Terry for calling in. And we'll see you next week.
Thank you, Dr. Judy.
Thank you. Good night, everyone.